Hello, folks. How's everybody doing today? I hope you're doing fine. And today we have a great day, hopefully. So if you've got something better to do, well, then don't do it. Stick around, you might learn something. Um, you saw the title, and you may wonder where I got that. Well, there was a fellow who made a comment, visitor, says, Objectivists prove to not be so objective. They're subjectivists. And I kind of agree with that. And that's one of the reasons I, use this title. What I want to discuss today is that philosophy, this doesn't concern Ayn Rand only. It concerns philosophy. What is philosophy? And before we can get to Ayn Rand and find out what her definitions say, specifically quoting her verbatim, and analyze that, we need to know, we need to set the stage. Right now, we don't know what philosophy is. We have a major problem understanding what philosophy is. And of course, people who have gone to high school, college, and took philosophy, they have this notion of what philosophy is supposed to be. And we're going to do our best to destroy that notion. And that's where it starts. Because if we have a different notion of philosophy, of what philosophy is or supposed to be, what the purpose of philosophy is, well, that's going to take us it's going to save us a lot of time, because then you're going to understand why we have objections to objectivism, as it is called. I think that title said it better. It's subjectivism. Okay. There was a comment. And by the way, you're welcome to ask questions. I'm going to try to answer them at the end of the lecture, talk. And so if there are some interesting questions that I can answer on the run, well, I'm going to do that. Okay. Anyways, here I had a comment from someone. It says, too far off the deep end. Was a sub for 10 years. Goodbye. Okay, so I had a guy who was there 10 years following me, apparently. And apparently what I said in the last couple, I guess, lectures on Ayn drove him away. And I see this on and off quite a bit. A lot of the people from the electric universe, they liked a lot of what I said, because I criticized the establishment. Okay, and what happened was that when I started criticizing them, that's when people, that's when the electric universers, started beating me up. Same thing happened with the flat earthers. As long as I was criticizing the establishment, everybody was happy. But when they found out that I was criticizing flatland as well, they abandoned me. And same with the John Chapel Society, the John Chappell Society, call them John Chapel. And they are etherists. They believe in the ether. Some of them wave the ether and believe in waves. Some of them just leave the particles there. And as long as you criticize general relativity, which is their main gripe, no problem. But when you attack the ether, particles, that's when they get, a little nervous. And the same thing happens and will happen with people who, are followers of Ayn Rand. They've been following her for a long time. They made her into this idol, this heroine. And when you attack something like that, something so vital to their own philosophy, their own way of thinking, their own religion, that's when they get a little upset. They don't like that. And that's normal. I can't do anything about it. All I can do is present my case, and it's up to every individual to decide for him, herself, which way they're going to go. Okay, and so a lot of people who have been following me over the years, once they find out what it's all about, they don't stick around. And in a way, it's good, because there's only two possibilities, or maybe three. They weren't paying attention, or it took him, like in this case, 10 years to figure out that I wasn't saying what he thought I was saying. And that says a lot. You know, I had a talk today with my son, Ans, and I said, "Is this so difficult?" I mean, we have a definition here of the word object, that which has shape. How difficult can that be to understand? And that's kindergarten stuff. And yeah, it has a lot of ramifications. I even say that the definition of the word object destroys all religions. And I stick by that statement. It's a very powerful statement, and only when you really get a grasp of that, what the ramifications of that definition are, is when you realize how important that statement is. And he answered the following. He says, no, it's not so easy. I said, what do you mean? I mean, am I talking in Chinese here? I mean, the word exist, physical presence, they're all very short definitions. They're all interrelated. I'm talking about the rope model of light and gravity. You watch the movie, you should understand it directly by just watching the movie. I should be able to shut my mouth. You should watch and realize, what the mechanisms that I'm proposing are. And he says, no, it's not easy. And I said, what do you mean it's not easy? And he says, it's not easy because it's like, and he gave me a good analogy. He says, it's like that magician that's on stage. He does a little magic trick. And you look at the magic trick and say, oh, how did he do that? Oh, that's not a trick. That's black magic. That's black magic. I mean, he's invoked the devil there to do that. How did he do that trick? And once someone explains the trick to you, or you find out about it, you say, oh, it was so easy. That's how he tricked me. That's how he fooled me. There is no black magic. But it seems like black magic until you understand the trick, how the magician did the trick. And that's the issue here. The issue is that, until you understand it, it's all, could be Chinese, it could be ancient Greek as far as you're concerned. But once you understand it, you can use it to spot errors in anything you read. And I know that a lot of the people who are into rational science, there's a group there we have in Facebook. A lot of those people have been around for a while. Now they can spot the errors just by reading what someone wrote. And that's how powerful that thing is, and you are able to counter whatever people write. In that sense, it's very powerful. Okay? But yeah, I think it's easy, but it's easy when you know only how the magician did the trick. Essentially, that's what it comes down to. Okay, here was one comment made by a fellow, and it shows you where we stand on the word object. It says, better definition that physical is the same as object is the minimum number of neurons stimulated by sensory inputs outside the brain. Concept is then the combining two or more of these objects to form a larger number of neurons connected. And then he continues in another side, an object is a shape. No, a shape. What is a shape? No. But continuing, a shape interacts with the brain, triggering the minimum number of stimulated neurons. As you point to it, a standalone is to recognize it, which requires the same neurons triggered in interaction so that other persons can point to it. And again, did this person understand what an object is? Did he understand, I assume it's a he, did he understand that object comes before motion, before neurons, before what neurons do? And these are the people later on find out, oh, Bill is not saying the same thing that I was saying. And that's when they abandon me. After 10 years, sometimes it takes 10 years for some people to realize that I'm not saying the same thing that they are. Okay. In fact, today I had a situation with my wife. We had to talk about the word object. And and she says, I'm wrong. Can you believe that? After 44 years of marriage, she's saying that I'm wrong. I'm wrong about the word object. My definition is wrong. It's not right. And I couldn't believe that. It's our first misunderstanding in 44 years of marriage. It's grounds for divorce. Yes, Your Honor, we have irreconcilable differences on the definition of the word object. So yeah, it's very hard to understand sometimes. You would think it's easy, but it's not. For a lot of people have these common notions of what an object is, what physical means, and they don't apply, at least in rational science. When you start, you know, defining these words scientifically, very, very crisply, very rigorously, then a lot of religions die, and people don't like that. They say, "Oh, hold it, is that what you're saying? Oh no, I don't agree with you. I don't agree with that definition because you're raping my virgin here. It's like your God suddenly died. All these icons you had, suddenly disappeared." Okay, so yeah, you got to pay attention because the definitions are going to be critical in under rational science. Okay, another comment. Another fellow came up here and he says the following. He says, you have constructed a unique domain-specific language, DSL. Okay, domain-specific language. Saying I've invented a language applicable, I guess, either to philosophy or physics. I'm not sure which one he was referring to. But he says, how is your DSL not just like another human operating system, like the other religions? Okay? Do you think people should adopt your DSL as an operating system in private or public? Does your DSL have any pros and cons in private or public domains compared to the alternatives? What benefits does adopting your DSL provide for people individually and in aggregate? Does it potentiate greater wealth, health, or sustainability? If so, how? Okay, I like that comment, these comments, or these questions, because I think a lot of people out there might have similar questions or things running through their mind along those lines. Okay, here are my replies to those, so I'm going to put them in parallel here. Okay, and the first thing is, in science we define, in religion we believe. So whatever we talk, whenever we use the word believe, we're talking about religion. In religion, we adopt. That means we're going to accept a theory as our personal theory because we like it for whatever reason. In science, we understand. That's where we stop. We explain and understand. That's different. That's more objective. You understand, you believe whatever you want after that. In religion, there is good and bad. In science, there is only rational. Okay, consistent use, objectivity. Does pros and cons allude to opinions or to alternative explanations? I mean, if we're talking about explanations, it's something worth treating. But if you're just talking about opinions, I like it, I don't like it, it's good, it's bad, then it's not important for science. And then the last comment, in religion, specifically in mathematical so-called physics, there are benefits, wealth, sustainability, in other words, technology. In science, there's only explanation. Science is good for nothing. Please remember that. Science is good for nothing. And people have a trouble with that because they've always associated science with technology, with profit, with doing something with it. No, we don't do anything with science other than understanding the secret agents Mother Nature uses to run her invisible shop. That's the only profit. In other words, science is good for nothing, and people have problem understanding that. That's why we had to define it for, separately as rational science from what people do out there, which they call science. Science is not about measurement, about calculating, about getting equations, which is what mathematical physics has evolved into. Science is about trying to understand how this universe works. I want to know how gravity works. I want to know how a magnet attracts another one. And in order to understand that, those type of phenomena, we need to figure out what the invisible entities that Mother Nature uses to do her magic. And that's what we want to know. So we don't want an equation. I don't want the guy coming back and saying, here's the equation. I don't care. That's a description. I want to know the mechanism, how Mother Nature does her little magic. Okay? That's the issue. And so, we have to keep these things in the right context, and that's a little bit of what we're going to do today, because I'm going to argue that philosophy is not opposed to science. Science says, as a lot of people today have this notion that here's science and here's philosophy, and they're like two separate things. Philosophy deals with that and science deals with that. No, we put science at the top, and philosophy is a branch of science. Okay, rational science. And so that's what I want to focus on today. That's what I'm going to try to get across to you. You don't have to agree. We don't agree in science. In science, we fight. We get in the ring and battle, duke it out, and only one man can remain standing in science. Okay, the other guy has to leave the ring, with an ambulance. Okay. Let me get to another point here. Someone raised, and some people may want to know because I mentioned it last time. Okay, this person says, you mentioned you were no longer an atheist. Could you please expand? Can you elaborate on you not being an atheist anymore? Okay. First thing I want to mention there, yeah, I was an atheist for, I don't know, maybe 40 plus years of my life since I was born. I was born in an atheist home. We were not just regular middle of the road atheists. We were militant atheists. We joined American atheists almost at its founding in the 60s. Okay, my mother and father, they were militant atheists. Okay, and so I was born in that environment, and it takes a long time to come out of these religions. I was into communism. It took a lot to come out of communism. It took a lot to a lot of thinking, a lot of comparing, a lot of philosophizing, I guess you could say, to come out of those religions. And so where do we put atheism today? At least the rational science, okay? So here it goes. I hope I can offend as many people as I can here. These are all religious fanatics as far as rational physics is concerned. Theist, person who believes, knows that God exists. Atheist, a person who believes, knows that God doesn't exist. And there's a big debate there. I'm not going to go into it today about, whether an atheist is a belief system, okay? Whether an atheist is someone who believes, or a system of belief, etc. There's the atheists don't want to accept that they have a belief system, okay, and that's where the battle is. But that's a big battle. Okay, I'm not going to go into that right now. Agnostic, a person who doesn't know whether God exists or holds that God's existence cannot be proven, or anything along those lines. And we put all these groups together with the Hare Krishnas, the Jehovah's Witnesses, fundamentalists, fanatic Muslims. They're all the same. As far as we're concerned, all these people belong in the same boat. And you say, well, why is so? Well, what other possibility is there, right? I mean, it looks like we covered every base. You either believe, you don't believe, maybe you believe, maybe you don't believe. Then what else is there, right? Okay, so let's put it in the right context here. Here we have it. The problem is hypothesis. That's what it is. And right now, nobody knows what a hypothesis is on the entire planet. If you look up the word hypothesis, and I mean, you do research on it, not just look it up and say, okay, I know what a hypothesis is. No, I mean, if you go out there and look at comments and really do a research on the word hypothesis, no one has any idea. Everybody has a different idea. These are just examples that I pulled out of different notions that we have of the word hypothesis. An objective or purpose, okay? An investigative proposal or question, a prediction or testable statement, an assumption or guess, an explanation, a theory, data analysis. Hypothesis, all that? Jesus. Is an assumption the same thing as an explanation? Is a prediction the same thing as data analysis? Are all these synonyms? See, people have all these notions of the word hypothesis, and obviously no one has any idea what a hypothesis is. You wouldn't be able to define it precisely according to today's science, contemporary science, okay? So, yeah, we differ a little bit there, and that's going to come in handy to explain a little bit about God, but let's find out what a hypothesis is in the alternative, which really has to do with the rational scientific method, okay? So here it is. This is the rational scientific method, so you have a point to compare with, okay? Again, doesn't mean you agree. We never agree in science. What we do is we fight, okay? We fight until someone dies, okay? Hypothesis. The word means assumptions. It includes the object's definitions and the initial scene or frame, okay? Do you see any provision for prediction, for objective or purpose, for explanation in any of those? Objects, you name the objects that you're going to use. This is for physics, okay? The objects that you're going to present, the ones that are going to be the main actors in your theory. The definitions that you're going to use, you're going to make them very crisp, very rigorous. The initial scene, so you show the first frames of the film, and then what continues is the theory based on all these assumptions, on these suppositions. What you have is, in physics, you're going to explain a mechanism or a cause, and then you're going to interpret that for the crowd, your personal interpretation, and have some corollaries or whatever. Okay, so you can see that we have a different notion of what a hypothesis is than all these other folk. Okay, and again, you don't have to agree, you just have to define the word hypothesis for me in a way that you can use it consistently, scientifically, rationally. Okay, and yeah, so God cannot be can never be a theory. God is like a chair. Can a chair be a theory? No. You point, you say chair, now you're going to use it to explain, I don't know, how the window broke. You say, let us assume there was a chair, and Johnny took the chair and broke the window with it. And you can assume that it was a brick or maybe a crowbar. So now you have the element that was used, but that's not a theory. The theory is what he did with it. And God, in a similar way, you cannot say, I believe that God exists. I don't believe that God exists, partly because the word exists has no provision for belief. That's the first issue. But the next one is that you cannot say that God is a theory. God can only be a hypothesis under those definitions. Okay? God can only be an object. And you have to define the terms that you're going to use, and then you create the initial scene. And you can use God to explain why this world was not created by God, or you can use it to explain why the world was created by God. You can explain whatever you want after that. But God himself, poor man up there, he cannot be a theory. He can only be an object. He can be an actor, not a theory. And that's where we differ with atheists, theists, and agnostics. All these people are confusing theory with hypothesis. Okay. Okay, let's continue here. Here's another comment that was made. Okay. Says, Bill does not understand the purpose of philosophy. Purpose of philosophy is to ground ethics. Okay. Let's see. Is that what we do with philosophy? And when we look up ethics, again, I'm going to put it side by side, we find that ethics has to do with moral principles, recommending concepts of right and wrong conduct. And if you look up the word moral, yeah, it says right and wrong behavior. So what is a right behavior, correct behavior? When the lion kills the wildebeest to eat, I guess. Maybe out of, it might kill a hyena out of spite, but, it's the enemy. But kills a wildebeest you want to eat. Is that immoral? Oh, people say no, but that's, that's nature. Especially animal lovers, I like it. They take pictures how or film, when the lion is killing the buffalo, and they say, oh, that's nature, so beautiful. And instead of saving the animal, they say, they don't chase the lion away. They say, no, it's nature, and we have to let nature take its course, right? Animal lovers do that, so it's a nice contradiction. Anyways, ethics. Ethics is about right and wrong, good and bad opinions. So ethics plays no part whatsoever in science. And if we're going to incorporate philosophy under science, then ethics has no point whatsoever. And you say, well, why do we have to put philosophy under science? That's what I'm going to get to today, okay? So let's continue here. Here's another comment. I just want to cover the comments first, okay? There were like 3 comments there, okay? You are giving your opinions. No, hopefully what I'm doing is defining objectively so that I can use it consistently, okay? Scientific definitions, use consistently, okay? Consistent use. You don't get to throw out words just because you don't like how they are often applied. Again, I'm trying to set the foundations of science. Okay? I'm trying to get a language started that we can all use consistently when we communicate with each other. Then you can understand what I'm saying. If we're not going to define some of these key terms, we don't have to define every word in the dictionary. We just have to define those words that make or break our theories, our explanations. And if we don't do that, we don't know what the other guy's saying. This guy, A interprets one thing, B interprets something else. And that's the problem we have today. There's no communication. People think they're listening to the same thing, but a lot of it depends on your biases, on your prejudices, how you were educated, etc., etc. Okay? What you believe, she said. Referring to Ayn Rand, right? And I quote, I'm going to quote, I haven't done so, I haven't even gotten to Ayn Rand yet, because we need to set this foundation. What is philosophy? And if philosophy is subjective or objective. If it's going to be objective, we're going to have to change a little bit of what Ayn Rand did, because all of her stuff was, all of it, 120% of it was subjective. Okay, and I'm going to show that with her own quotes. Okay, but this is the issue: is I quote Ayn, I'm going to quote Ayn verbatim and establish objectively what she said. That's what I'm going to get to. Okay, but right now we're still trying to set the foundations for philosophy. And I do caution and clarify, I'm not a philosopher. I'm not interested in philosophy. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, I guess I'm going to get a little ahead of myself on what philosophy is, but I don't explain behavior. I'm not interested in that. I do that in history, but I don't do that on my channel very much. Maybe one time or another I may have done that, but I'm not into that at all. Okay, so let's get on with it. What is philosophy? Well, last time we left off with Mr. Aristotle, and this comes from his book, Metaphysics. All men consider philosophy, love of wisdom, right, as concerned with first causes and principles. And he continues, wisdom is knowledge about certain principles and causes. Okay, and the first objection I have is the word cause. That's physics, not philosophy. But I'm worried more about that word knowledge. We're going to find out knowledge not only has never been defined. To this day, no one knows what knowledge is. No one can define it precisely. You can go to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. You can go to the Wikipedia. You won't find a crisp definition that you can sink your teeth on. And whatever definition is there is easy to tear apart. Okay? So we don't have the word knowledge, and they're still, like they say, debating what knowledge is. But here we have Mr. Aristotle, and he says that philosophy is somehow related or based on knowledge. Okay, so that's the first thing we need to clarify there. What do we have today? Well, here you have a definition of philosophy from this is from the Wikipedia. Okay, it says philosophy, love of wisdom, right? Again, they take the Greek term, they translate it, okay, is the study. Very big problem there. Studying should never be used. Study means you're going to study, even if you studied for one day. You went to school for the first day and you sat down in Philosophy 101 and someone asked you, are you a philosopher? Yeah, I'm a philosopher. Yeah, I studied. Oh, you studied what? You got a degree in philosophy? No, I studied for 5 minutes that I sat in Philosophy 101. That makes you a philosopher because you studied? You studied for the test, you failed the test, but you studied and you're a philosopher? So the word study should be removed completely. You should never use it, okay? Studying doesn't tell you anything. And that's the first issue. It says study of general and fundamental questions about what? Existence? Existence belongs to physics, not to philosophy. First problem. Knowledge, values, reason, mind, and language. That's what Wikipedia says. And what does it have as questions that concern philosophers? Is it possible to know anything and to prove it? Very subjective. Okay. What is most real? Again, that's physics. Is there a best way to live? Recommendation. That's philosophy. Is it better to be just or unjust? Justice, law. Is that philosophy? Do humans have free will? That's philosophy. So the issue here is that none of these really represent anything. They're all opinions. They're all subjective. And I thought we were going to make philosophy objective. So this is where we have to look at, because what these people are saying essentially is philosophy is a way of thinking. That's essentially what the definition, this informal definition, comes down to, this popular definition. It's his philosophy. It's Joe's way of thinking. That's what they're saying. We can't use that definition in any old way, because way of thinking means it's just too big, too broad. You got to narrow it down. You got to say, well, what is philosophy? Is it just a way of thinking? No, that's the common notion of philosophy. We can't use that in a scientific way, in a rational way, in a consistent way. That's the problem, okay? And there was someone who came in there also and put a comment similar to that, to what we find in the Wikipedia. It says, philosophy, the explanation of, as you can see, he had to put explanation in brackets. Why? Because explanation is not in there. He put it in, he forcefully put it in there. But it says the fundamental questions about existence, knowledge, values, mind, and art, etc. Reason, mind, and art. In other words, he's including all the same things. Everybody has the same notion of what philosophy is. It's got to do with knowledge, with values, with justice, with who knows what. It's a jack of all trades. They put everything in there and say philosophy is everything. Anything you can think about, that's philosophy. It's your way of thinking. And that's no good. That's absolutely no good. We can't use that as a definition, as a scientific definition of the word philosophy, if it's going to be important. I mean, if you're going to mention philosophy as a category of subcategories, you know, this is the major category, the heading, we better define it properly. We have to define it precisely, okay? And that's where we're starting to have problems with some of these definitions. Okay, as a result of those wishy-washy definitions of covering every base, what they ended up with today is with six categories of philosophy, or subcategories, 6 branches, okay? And they originate from the basic questions. And you got to look at the questions. You can see that they're all opinionated. They're all subjective. Aesthetics, what is beautiful? You know, what is beautiful to me is ugly to you. You know, the cockroach thinks her baby is the most beautiful in the world. You know, I mean, ethics, what is good? What is good? What is bad? That's religion. You know, good and bad, evil, angel, you know, those terms come from religion. So ethics is a branch of religion, not a branch of philosophy. Epistemology, what is knowledge? Well, we don't know. We don't have a definition, and then we would have to define it properly. And it turns out when you look it up, knowledge is just justified true belief. We're still using Plato's version of what knowledge is. Logic, how do I know it? In other words, the inductive and deductive reasoning that is used. You know, that's a process. Logic is not philosophy. Logic is just a mechanism, a method of reaching some kind of conclusion. Okay? Political philosophy, how do we act, or how should we act? Really, you should read, you know. I mean, you know, liberty, justice, property, all that's opinion. You know, what is justice to you is injustice to me. So, you know, a lot of these terms, people think philosophy is just opinion. It's his philosophy, Joe's way of thinking. Is that what philosophy is? That's what we're going to fight over, philosophy, just ways of thinking? No, hopefully we can put it in some kind of scientific, more rigorous context, okay? And then we have the 6th branch, which is the one that's so interesting, you know. This is metaphysics, okay? And metaphysics, you know, has 2 branches, apparently, cosmology and ontology. So we have philosophy, and under that we have metaphysics, and under that we have ontology. So we have all these subcategories of philosophy. So what is ontology? We can skip over cosmology, okay? Ontology deals with questions concerning what entities exist or can be said to exist. Well, I thought that was physics. I think physics has to tell you how this universe runs. Physics has to tell you what exists out there. That's the job of physicists, not of philosophers. This is not a question of that philosophers have to deal with. You know, I think it's very clear, at least under rational science, that if physics deals with objects and physics is the science of existence, then this is in the wrong place completely. And what happened was, since the 17th century, what they did was, it says there, the scientific method, however, made natural philosophy an empirical and experimental activity, unlike the rest of philosophy. And by the end of the 18th century, it had begun to be called science in order to distinguish it from philosophy. Again, these people, what they did was separate so-called science from philosophy. Like, philosophy is not part of science. And this is where we differ, because we're going to put philosophy back into science. And you're going to say, well, what's the justification for that? What's the reasoning for that? And so let's get into that. Well, first let's go with what's wrong with the current definitions, okay? Let's put this on this side, okay? And the first problem is it's unscientific. Okay, it's an unscientific definition that we have today. In fact, we don't really have a precise definition, as you can see. A lot of it depends on opinions, on subjectivity. Tradition and authority, we inherited this from the Greeks, passed it on for 2,500 years from generation to generation, and we accept it. It's like nobody challenges. It's like nobody says, well, is that philosophy? Is that what philosophy is about? Am I saying that all philosophers in the last 2,500 years were wrong? No, I'm saying they had an irrational definition of philosophy. And that's why people from all the way from Aristotle to Ayn Rand and beyond got it wrong. Not wrong, really. Got it irrational, because they never knew what philosophy is. They never defined philosophy precisely in a way that it can be used consistently. Okay? And a lot of people say, well, you don't need to do that with philosophy, because philosophy is just a way of thinking. No, not if we're going to use it objectively, which is what Ayn Rand attempted to do. She called her philosophy Objectivism. And it had nothing with, like I said at the beginning, it had nothing to do with objectivism. It was totally subjective, because Ayn Rand continues to put in every word, every sentence she pronounced, she continues to put the observer, senses, sensations, consciousness, knowledge, all those are subjective, all of them. Okay? And so she kept putting subjectivity in there and calls it objective. No. A lot of people don't want the definition I'm going to propose, or rational science proposes, because they want to protect their religion. And so, yeah, it's going to hurt if you accept this definition. It's going to hurt. But the alternative is very simple. You got to come up with, the onus is on you to come up with a definition that you can use consistently. And if you say, well, I'm not going to do that, I'm just going to continue believing what I believe in, and then all you got is a religion. You can't call it science. You can't call it, and if we're going to include philosophy within science, well, you're not doing philosophy either. You're just doing strictly religion. And religion is not philosophy. Okay? Religion is not a philosophy. No. And I'll get to that in a second. Okay, the other problem with philosophy today is it's jack of all trades. It does justice, it does ethics, it does existence, knowledge, epistemology, ontology. They just put everything in there and say it does everything. That's like God, God is everything. And so God is everything, so what can you explain if God is everything, if it's all? Okay? And then the other issue is that because of that, it ends up saying that philosophy is just a way of thinking. And that's not very precise, and certainly not very useful for any discussion, any objective philosophy, any objective discussion, debate, whatever. It includes ontology, which are issues and metaphysics, which are issues that belong strictly to physics, have nothing to do with philosophy. And then, obviously, because they have all these issues where they're not, I just have to say, they don't explain anything with this. Because of that, it's just opinion. Okay, it's just opinion. It's religion. Opinion is religion. It's a synonym of religion. That's what religion is. Religion is not the belief in God. Religion is opinion. If you have an opinion, you have a religion. And everybody has one. Forget it. We all have a religion. We all believe in something. Okay? Okay, so here it is. This is the summary of Aristotle. We have senses, sensations. That's what we ended up with today for philosophy. Consciousness and knowledge. Okay, so you sense through the hands, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and from there it reaches your attic, goes to consciousness, and so now you're one with the universe, right? And from there, what comes out is knowledge. That's the notion that people have of philosophy today, and that's comes from areas old-fashioned philosophy. Okay, yeah. If you're going to think of philosophy as just a jack of all trades, anything goes, it's just your way of thinking, that's what you end up with. You end up with subjectivity, because then everybody's got his own philosophy and it becomes subjective. Okay, so what is uh, the purpose of philosophy and the alternative? What are we trying to do with philosophy? And so here's the rational science version. Science is rational explanations, and it's divided into physics and philosophy. And the portion that deals with philosophy deals with reasons and purpose. Religion, on the other hand, which is not philosophy, religion is opinions and beliefs. And it includes all those items there, anything related to the senses, truth, fact, knowledge, proof, evidence, consciousness, sensations. And that's why we ended up with irrational theories, which include all of mathematical physics, theism, atheism, agnosticism, epistemology, knowledge, right? Ontology, what exists from a knowledge point of view, not what exists out there independent of man, but what man thinks exists out there based on his senses. And, metaphysics, which is, ontology is a branch of metaphysics. So this is the issue. The issue is that what we've done is we've made philosophy very subjective, and anyone who's been doing philosophy, quotations, for the last 2,500 years has been doing subjectivity. And so it's funny that Ayn Rand said, oh, her stuff is not. Her stuff is objective. No, because she did philosophy the old-fashioned way, Aristotle's way, okay? She did it the old-fashioned way. She didn't realize that she had to define philosophy very strictly first. And if she wants to be objective, she's got to put it under science, because science is objective. Religion is not objective. Religion is totally subjective. So philosophy is not part of religion, and religion is not a part of philosophy. They're two separate things. Religion only has irrational proposals or supernatural proposals. Philosophy has to be rational. So what are we trying to do with this rationality? Well, if it's part of science, you got to explain something, because science, rational science at least, explains, okay? And so here you have the definition of philosophy. It's rational explanations of behaviors. You want to know why someone did something, maybe in psychology or psychiatry. Maybe you want to know, again, like I always use the example, why Napoleon went to Waterloo. You want to have a theory, an explanation. Theories are part of science, and it's got to be objective. Objective means I believe. No, you can believe whatever you want. Here you're at the conference, you're going to explain why, right? Why Napoleon went to Waterloo. And people say, oh, but that's your belief. Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's my belief or I'm representing someone else's belief. I could talk about, for example, in the case of general relativity, I can talk about space-time. Does that mean I believe in space-time because I theorize about space-time? And likewise, I can present a theory about why Napoleon went to Waterloo. Does that mean I believe in that theory? No, maybe I can say, look, perhaps he went for this reason. That's a theory. You might believe it, you might not believe it. It doesn't matter. What you believe is your personal opinion. But the theory, the reason that you're explaining that you're explaining the reason why Napoleon went to Waterloo, that's objective. Okay? That's what philosophy does. All these are part of philosophy. And you say, how do you justify that? And here's the justification, okay? And the justification is the social sciences, okay? You have all these so-called social sciences. And it's, if you look it up, it says a category of academic disciplines concerned with society and the relationships among individuals within a society. The disciplines include, but are not limited to, and here you have the big list, okay? And you will see history, you will see psychology, political science, and so on. You'll see all these different categories that fall under what we call social sciences. And so here's the $1,000,000 question. Why are these social so-called sciences? What is scientific about them? And again, you would have to define what science is to incorporate the social sciences, because science is no longer just the empirical stuff that you do by going to the lab and running some kind of experiment. This is a science too, and what are you going to do? Some kind of chemical experiment? You're going to mix two chemicals to show why Napoleon went to Waterloo? No. If history is going to fall under the social sciences and it's a science, what is scientific about them? How do you define, please help me, how do you define science in such a way as to incorporate the social sciences? What are you incorporating? What you're incorporating is explanations. A theory is an explanation of something. In the case of physics, an explanation of a mechanical or phenomenon, you know, mechanistics of it, or a cause. And in philosophy, what we're explaining is reasons and purposes, intentions. Why did someone do something? Otherwise, it's not scientific. Otherwise, you can't call them science. And all those social sciences, the explanations that go into each one of those disciplines, those together is what we call philosophy. Okay? And you might say, well, you don't agree. Fine, you don't have to agree. We don't agree in science. What you have to do is come up with a definition of philosophy that we can use consistently. And if you can't do it, and you just say, well, I'm not going to get into that ring, I'm not going to fight, well, then all you got is a religion, according to rational science. Okay, so here's the summary of what I wanted to present today. Hopefully I got some of the main points across. Okay, here goes the rundown. Ayn used subjective definition of philosophy, which is the one that's used in ordinary speech, which is, you know, that's his philosophy. That's his way of thinking. That's it. That's all it means. Ayn's Objectivism is based on sensus consciousness, what we know. Those are the words she uses almost every sentence that she wrote in her life. And what that does is just take it into subjectivity. So her Objectivism is, like the title says in this video, it's subjectivism. And so I agree with the fellow who put that comment in there, which formed the title of this lecture. There's been a paradigm shift. We have new definitions of the word science, physics, and philosophy. You don't have to agree. You just have to define. If you don't like the definitions, if you're a devil's advocate or skeptic or whatever, hey, there's your job. Your job is to define these three words consistently because they form the foundations of rational debate. And if you can't define the word science, the word physics, or the word philosophy, then you got no case. All you have is religion, belief. And then again, that's the last part there. Onus on skeptics and devil's advocates to define philosophy objectively, scientifically, in a way that it can be used consistently. Okay, with that, I'm going to open the floor for questions. Let's see if we have any specific questions we can address here. Let me look in here. There's quite a bit written. Sometimes I can't get to all of them. I'll try to get to them. If I can't get to them today, what I try to do is, you know, look at it later on and try to answer in the next session. Okay. Just the truth and nothing but the truth. Not me, man. Yeah, we don't believe in truth. Truth is an opinion. What is truth to your neighbor is a lie to you, you know. Objectivism is, well, many latch on to her ideas and they don't understand. Okay, see, objective is not libertarian. Okay, materialist, yeah. Yeah, betrayal. Okay, okay. You're a champ. Well, thank God. I thought I was a chimp. Okay, some people would say that. Okay. Random question. What do you think of the idea of eternal recurrence? Finite matter moving eternally will eventually result in the repetition of all possible events. Well, I don't know. That's a tough one, Mike. I don't know. I haven't lived as long as God, so I can't tell you if things recur, if things repeat themselves, if there was another Earth before us, if there was another Bill Gates before us on that Earth. You know, I doubt it. I have doubts that there would be something like that if that's what you're referring to. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. Here Louise says, according to man's nature, what is good objectively for him, morality is for living. I agree, it does not belong in science. Yeah, and that's the issue. I've got a problem with anything that is subjective, because if it's subjective, then we can't call it first. We can't call it objectivism. That's the first one, if that's what Ayn Rand was into. The other issue is that if we're going to talk about something which we can use consistently in a debate or in a discussion or whatever, we can't have this wishy-washy stuff of morality, of ethics, of justice. What is justice? Well, you know, you asked a lion if he was doing justice with a wildebeest. I mean, fortunately, the animals teach us a lot, and that's that they don't have any of this subjectivity. Okay, so it's good to watch animals, see what they do. Okay, Rand defines morality different in all philosophy. Okay, I'll get to the definitions. Okay, I don't want to get too we want to concentrate on philosophy. Philosophy asks three fundamental questions about existence. About existence? I don't think so. What is true? There's no such thing. How do I know? No such thing. What should I do? Not important. What you should do is is remove the word existence from philosophy. There's no such thing, no such relation between existence and philosophy if we define philosophy as explanations of behavior. Existence has to do with physics. Physics is the science of existence. Why? Because physics tries to explain how this universe works, and for that it has to determine or at least speculate on what might exist there in order to be able to produce that mechanism. Okay, so existence belongs exclusively to physics, not at all to philosophy. It does belong to science only through philosophy, not through physics. Thinking reason is a science. I don't know. I don't think that is. Thinking alone is not science. Science is explaining something. Thinking reason is just a process. Okay. A reason meaning the ability to thinking. Yeah, I guess that's what you meant there in that sentence. Thinking reason is not science. Thinking and reason is a process of how we. It's like talking about inductive or deductive reasoning. That's got to do with the process of how you arrive at your conclusions. You know, that in itself is not science. It's not even part of the scientific method. It's what you do before going to the conference. You say, well, how am I going to come up with a good argument? And so that's when you start thinking either in inductive or deductive terms. Now you've got your conclusion or your theory. Now you go to the conference and you explain your theory. And you know, nobody cares how you came to it. It could have been through a bad dream. You know, you had a nightmare and that's how it came to your mind. Fine, that's great. We don't care. We just want to know the theory. What's your explanation? Okay. Without consistent metaphysics, you can't have a coherent physics. Well, again, we have to define what these are. Again, people are referring to the mechanism of how you come to certain conclusions or to certain theories, and not what physics and philosophy are per se. First, we have to define what physics and what philosophy are per se, or in this case, metaphysics, which is typically concerned or put under philosophy. And no, when you go in there and look at the nitty gritty and start defining these broad categories, that's when people run into trouble. And again, the only way you can hold on to these statements is by defining precisely what you mean. You have to define what physics is, what science is, what philosophy is. In this case, you can also define what metaphysics is precisely. It cannot be wishy-washy. Okay? Lots of questions here. Okay. We have to discover knowledge through our senses. First, we have to define knowledge before we can discover it. Okay. Why on earth would you present explanations if it was irrelevant whether you actually believe it? It doesn't matter. You can, like I said, you can present an explanation for on behalf of relativity so that the audience understands what relativity or what Einstein tried to say, what his theory was. I don't have to believe in it. I can present someone else's theory and say, well, this is what this guy believed in, or this is what this guy proposed, as a mechanism for how the universe works. I don't have to believe in it. Okay, that's one issue. But the other issue is that, again, all we're talking about is, in the case of physics, a mechanism. You present a mechanism, objective mechanism, people understand the mechanism, that's it. Whether they believe in it or not, that's a separate issue. That's a personal issue. Okay, let's see what else we got here. My definition of philosophy. Okay, we got one here. Let's see, which translates literally straight from my ancient mother language into to catch the thread of, Ooh. You lost me there, Dardania. I don't know. To catch the thread or rope. Okay. I don't know. Okay, I don't know. I don't know what he was trying to ask there. Okay, here's another fellow. Physics is not simply interested in what exists, but also in change, the behavior of what exists. Totally agree. Physics not interested in just what exists. What I'm saying is the fois df, whatever. What I'm saying here is first, you need to present the objects for your theory, the mechanism that you're going to explain to the crowd, okay? You're going to present the object. You say, look, here's this object, here's this object. You can do particles, for example, or you can do space-time if you want. Fine. So you present that, assuming space-time is an object, you present that first. Now with that, you try to explain behavior of what exists. And by behavior, we don't mean behavior like behavior of human behavior. What we're talking about is really mechanism. That's the correct word for physics, not behavior. Okay, behavior, it could be very confusing because people might think that you're including how humans or animals or plants behave, living things. No, we're talking about here mechanisms. So mechanisms is what we're trying to explain, and for that you need to determine what exists. That's why existence belongs exclusively to physics. Okay. You cannot even do physics without perception. Yeah, we can, because we don't care about perception. What we need to do here is you can have a blind man who's deaf, quadriplegic, he can't sense, and he can do physics. And he doesn't have to perceive anything. The notion that we have to perceive, that we have to see, we have to use our senses, has nothing to do with it. You can just use your mind, sit back, and think. That's what physics is about. Physics is armchair physics. You sit back, you think, you try to visualize how this universe works. That doesn't mean you have to go out into space and touch the moon with your hand to say, let's see if I can, now that I perceive the moon or that I sense something, it could be the moon, an asteroid, it could be anything. Until you sense it, you're not going to explain it. No, you can explain it. Someone just tells you something, says, there's been a hole on the moon. I saw it, this guy saw it. You never saw anything. And you go in there and you say, okay, what could have caused it? And you have a theory, and you say, well, I think an asteroid hit the moon. That's a theory. You don't have to use perception for anything. Okay, perception introduces the observer, introduces subjectivity into physics, into science. Science is objective. You just got to explain the mechanism. That's it. Once you explain the mechanisms, the other person understands. You don't have to perceive anything. Metaphysics is the branch of philosophy defining the fundamental nature of existence. Okay, yeah, that's why metaphysics has nothing to do with philosophy. It's about setting up proper framework for rational physics. Yeah, physics, yeah, but not for philosophy. So again, metaphysics is always put under philosophy, and I'm saying no. What we're trying to do is set the stage for physics, which is a branch of science. Philosophy deals with behavior, human behavior primarily. you know, why someone does something. You could also put, for that matter, you could put animals in there and say, why did the lion do this or do that? Why did he behave that way? That's also, I guess, part of philosophy. Where does laws of nature axioms fit into your physics? Are they just opinions? Opinions, I already answered that question earlier. The point here is that it's not about opinions, it's about defining. You put out an objective definition, then you try to use that consistently. So it's not opinion, it's not, it's not a question of saying, well, I don't agree with that definition. No, it's not a question of agreeing or disagreeing or agreeing to disagree with a definition. The issue there is you got to get in the ring, put your own definition in the ring, and defend it with shield and sword. You got to fight for your definition. And only one definition can remain standing if it's critical to whatever theories that come out of there, okay? So no, these are not questions of definitions being personal opinions. In science, there are no opinions. Only one definition can remain standing, and the way it's going to remain standing is through fighting, through arguing, through clashing. You know, because otherwise people say, well, I don't like your definition. I'm going to stay with my definition. And, but he didn't get into the ring. He's got to get into the ring and defend it. Okay? Okay, so biology is part of philosophy. Biology, as far as behavior, yes, but biology is part of physics, okay, primarily, I would think, okay? Yeah, many of the issues straddle both physics and philosophy. You get things like, for example, archaeology, or perhaps better, anthropology. Some aspects of that belong to physics, some aspects belong to philosophy, okay? So, you cannot have everything just clear cut. And you would not be aware at all, being conscious. Well, you want to put the observer at all costs, right? Well, again, it's not a question of awareness, because we're focusing on the wrong aspect of this. If we're trying to explain physics, yeah, hopefully you're aware. You have to be conscious. You can keep on and on with that. The point here is that we're trying to give an explanation to a phenomenon. And the fact of how I came to that conclusion, to that theory, which is being aware, being conscious, having heard of it through my ears, having touched it, having seen it, all these things are second. They don't form part of the theory. They don't form part of the explanation of how Mother Nature runs her universe. In fact, it's the other way around. And here I'll give a little example, why awareness has nothing to do with it. And I'll close with this, okay? Here's two magnets, okay? Okay, magnets, okay? And do you have any perception? Do you see any magnetic field in there, so-called field? Okay, do you see the entity that's pulling these two things together? No, you don't. You don't see it. And believe me, I can't touch it. I don't touch anything here. You can't touch it, see it. I try to smell it. There's nothing there. Taste it. No taste. Can't hear it. Okay? And you say, well, but look, these two things come together. So there's got to be something in there, We'll call that something a magnetic field. So far, so good. Now let's remove one of the magnets. Now, can you see, touch, hear, smell, taste the magnetic field? There's nothing going on. I mean, I don't see anything. And as far as I'm concerned, this is just a piece of metal, piece of iron. I don't know. How do I know that there's a magnetic field here if I don't have the second magnet to test it with? If I just have this, okay? Is there a magnetic field? So if I depend solely on my senses, on my perception, I would not perceive a magnetic field. And I would have nothing to explain because I'm not aware, consciousness, that there's a magnetic field. The only way I'm going to know is that there's something there is by putting another one in there. Okay? So that's the point I'm trying to make. Anyways, we're over time. I know there's lots of questions. Put them up there. Yeah, it's better to put them in the Patreon. You don't have to pay a dime. You just got to register. And I see more questions. I'll see which ones are good, and I'll try to answer them next time, okay? Anyways, we'll see you on Sunday. By the way, on Sunday, I'm going to be on J.F. Garipi's The Public Space again. We're going to be talking a little bit about physics. So I'm going to have a double whammy. We're going to have the regular follow-up on Ayn Rand. Hopefully I can get to her quotes finally. And that's going to be on Sunday. And then later on, like 3 hours later, I'm going to be on the public space. So I'll see you, all of you there. Okay, kisses. Bye.